The Mississippi River is a massive waterway stretching from the Gulf of Mexico all the way to Minnesota. It floods regularly every year, but in the year 1927 its flooding reached epic proportions. Starting in 1926, massive rainstorms poured over the U.S. from the Rockies to the Appalachians. These rains didn't subside until June of 1927. This caused widespread flooding of the entire Mississippi River, eventually putting 1.5 million acres underwater. The flooding, at its peak, covered the combined size of Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Connecticut. Attempts to levee the river and stop some of the flooding quickly failed, and water poured into inhabited areas. Water rose as high as 30 feet and demolished houses in its path. The societal and economic impacts of this flood were immense. 1.5 million people lived in the area that was flooded, and 637,000 of those people were made homeless. Since this was early 20th century Mississippi, there were large African American populations in the area working on plantations. This meant that African Americans would be disproportionately affected by the flood, with 550,000 of them being made homeless. 250 to 1,000 people lost their lives due to the flooding, and the estimated economic impact is $1 billion, with massive damages to infrastructure and agriculture. The Army Corps of Engineers, the people responsible for putting up levees to stop the flooding, repeatedly assured the citizens that the levees would hold and that they would be safe. When the levees inevitably failed, the Red Cross partnered up with the southern plantation owners to set up camps where more levees would be built to stop flooding. These camps were primarily using African American labor, and camp conditions were bad. There were not enough tents, no utensils, and food was strictly regulated. African Americans were given worse quality food than white workers, and some, when trying to leave the camp, were turned back at gunpoint by the National Guard. The 1927 flood of the Mississippi marks a low point in American history, a hard time for many in the South, and a much harder time for the African Americans trying to survive.